Hi there and welcome to the Baldman Motors Workshop. So in today's video, this begins episode 1 of fixing everything that's wrong with my 2005 C55. So today we are going to be putting in a new Bosch starter. We're going to be replacing the seals on the oil filter housing next to the cooler. And then I have this little dog bone here. This little guy right here is responsible for the tilt steering wheel actually being operational. Mine is snapped right here in the middle so the motor runs and the wheel don't move. And also a few days later I ended up replacing some of the lifters and followers on the passenger side of my engine. So we're going to dig into that later in the video. So we'll get to the first project, which is getting the starter done. So the reason I'm replacing my starter today is that it was starting fine when it was cold, but when it was hot, it was just, the starter was running slow. I went ahead and used this here little gadget to test the battery. It's got an almost brand new platinum AGM battery, so there was no issues there. The voltage levels were fine, and so I'm going to go ahead and replace the starter. Currently, it has a Bosch in there. I don't know how old it is, but at this point, I might as well just replace it, because one of those things, if a starter's even giving you a hint that it might have something wrong with it, it's going to probably fail on you at the absolute worst time. So I'm going to go ahead and knock this out. The nice thing is I don't actually have to remove any part of my exhaust because the cats were removed by a previous owner. So it's just a straight pipe there, and there's quite a bit more room to operate. I'll probably still need to remove that side engine mount. See, I got the car up here on the quick jack, so it shouldn't be too bad to go ahead and get this done. Gives me a little bit of room to work. I'm not going to film everything underneath there because I think a lot of you probably know how to replace a starter. And then right after that, right here, we'll be taking replacing the seals that are in here, and then underneath the actual oil filter housing. All right, got it out. It's kicking my butt. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to have it so tight down there. I got the engine jacked up, took out one of the mounts. So the engine's just sitting up on a good old Harbor Freight jack and some 2x4s. Then the battery terminal slides on this right here, this stud here on the solenoid. And the hole's so small that any little bit of play and it won't even slide. I had to use a screwdriver to pry it off this stupid thing. So I don't know how I'm gonna get the new one on. That's gonna be fun. Oh yeah, another thing. I wonder whose idea it was to have like a 3mm thick nut that goes on the stud, so your socket just about freaking rounds it off. All right, so time to put in the next starter and get this engine back on its mount, because I don't want to trust this jack overnight. So I did get the new starter installed after quite a bit of hassle, and the car starts perfectly now every time. So the starter was certainly an issue, or the solenoid on the starter, but a combination of it was definitely the factor there. I'm glad I replaced it before it became a big issue. So I've started here working on this seal here for the oil filter housing, and just got the 3 screws and the wiring undone for this circular saw of an air pump, and that'll give me access to that little screw down there at the bottom. Alright, so we got the 4 bolts out here all the way around. Got the you're gonna want to take out the oil filter first, so that way all the oil drains out of the cooler and into here, and I made a mess. But anyways, so I'm going to take this off now, and then we can get this big nut that's right down there on the bottom. But I have a 1 13/16 inch socket that you can get in the Harbor Freight 3/4 inch set. It's like a $70 set, and so that's what I'll be using to take this nut out. Alright, crack her loose. That's the big nut you're doing. That's where the seal surface is, and the seal is right down here. There's the other 2 seals. But this one here was already cracked. I'm almost done here. Finished cleaning up a little bit. They had RTV pretty much all over the oil cooler. Always a good idea to plug that hole there so you don't get stuff inside your engine. I was always taught growing up that, you know, when you leave someone's house, you leave it cleaner than you found it, and I try to do the same thing with engines. So toothbrush and some engine degreaser. Got this pretty clean, new seals put in, so ready to go together. Okay, so we got the new big nut in there, torqued down. So basically get the 4 screws in there, put the little air pump back in, and put the oil filter in, of course, and we should be good to go. All right, so before I put everything back together, it's pretty useless for me. I don't have catalytic converters on this car, but the secondary air injection pump sounds like a complete buzzsaw every time I do a cold start. So I decided, hey, let's go ahead and take it apart and see what's inside and if there's any improvements I can make. So let's get to that. Okay, so right here we have one of the emissions air pumps here in the front, and easily just took off the 2 little blades that it has. Basically, very much like I guess the reverse of a vacuum. But anyways, so here's your brushes that wear out on these. These things are like $400, absolutely ridiculous. So what I did here is put in the last little bit here of my turbine oil on the two bearings, but it was sounding pretty rough, so I'm hoping this quiets it down a little bit. So we have the air pump installed. To reinstall the intake tube here and go ahead and start it and check for leaks, and then if we're good there, go ahead and put the final cover on. So this part's good. Eventually I'll likely be deleting all this stuff with the block-off plates, but I just haven't got to that yet. Also, while I was doing the oil seals, I should interject that I did order a $21 Limforder power steering reservoir, and it's like $4 or $5 for this little seal. And this little seal is why the power steering reservoir, it's a little elbow on top of the power steering pump, and that little seal goes bad and leaks just power steering fluid all over everything. So between doing the oil filter housing seals and the power steering seals, after now driving it, the entire front of my engine is now dry again finally. So definitely don't want to get oil or any of that stuff on the serpentine belt. So you can see here, if the motor runs, nothing happens. So I was able to take off the under panel down there. There's a link in the description that I'll put from another channel that I've seen. This guy was showing how to do this without, you know, it taking 5 hours. This is the broken dog bone, and they're supposed to be flexible and obviously still be connected. So this is like a soft rubber material. Then you got two little plastic pieces, and they're spline, and they fit one on the end of the motor and one on the actual shaft that runs the worm gear to move the steering wheel up and down. So basically what I'm going to try to do now is get my hand up in there, push the one side on, and then flex it as hard as I can, and hopefully get this other side on. The tilt steering wheel works. So the whole process took me about 20 minutes. It's pretty tight. You kind of got to lay on your back as you get under there, but overall, if I was a skinnier and younger man, probably a less than 10-minute job. So I got the dog bone in there, and it was a complete pain to do, but I didn't get any shots because trying to fit this little rig up in there was not happening, and I didn't even take the front dash cover off. It's literally just the bottom little tray, and then there's a piece of foam that you can tell from the other YouTuber's video, and then you're just up in there. It's extremely hard to get to. Basically just did it with the technique of pushing it on sideways and a pair of needle nose pliers is pretty much all you need. Okay, so I got the M113 kit here off of Amazon. It's about a $40 kit. I made a small mod. If you just cut this little tab off right here, you can get past the secondary air injection crap. And then I had to just slightly modify the little piece that goes into the cam, just grind it down just a little bit so it would fit because their casting was garbage. So we're 40 degrees past top dead center down there at the crank. That is a 1 1/16 inch socket. All right, so I've got a few zip ties here holding the chain onto the sprocket. I've already released the alternator here from its bracket. Underneath there is the timing chain tensioner, and so I'm going to loosen that up to release the tension on the cam. Now the cam I'm actually going to leave in here, but you don't want that tensioner to basically be putting a bunch of downward pressure and lifting the cam out when I'm actually just trying to take the bridge off and leave the cam in there. So, all right, so that big washer and bolt right there, that's actually the timing chain tensioner. Oil does leak out of that the minute you get it cracked open. It's 1 1/16 too, just like the crankshaft bolt. So we got that backed out, and now we're on to the sequence to remove the bridge and the rockers. Okay, so we got all of the bolts here loosened. You can basically lift each one out. It's important to note here, I'll link this guide here in the description below, but you want to go in reverse here of the tightening sequence. So the picture shows the tightening sequence. I'm using the right side here. And then, so I started at 18 and working my way to 1. So now I'm going to lift off these rockers and have a look at the lifters inside. So I've looked at all the cam journals and the lobes, and we're looking pretty good. We have some extremely light, like a couple very small scoring marks, but nothing serious. And all the rollers actually look pretty good as well. So got the rockers off. The ends of the valves look pretty decent. Nothing looks like super beat or hammered. Keep in mind, this is a 192,000 mile top of the engine. I'm actually pretty happy with how clean it's been so far. All right, so the handy FCP Euro box here. I put all the bolts here from my rocker arms. So you flip this over here carefully, and here is all of the lifters. And so far, I am not able to tell really a difference between each one. I can definitely tell that these here 4 up front are much dirtier. This would be the, I guess it would be the 4 intakes. And then you have 2 exhausts over there. And as you go to the back of the engine, these rocker arms progressively get cleaner. The noise sounded to me like it was coming from cylinder 1 and cylinder 2. The other thing to note here, as you can tell, is that the 2 front injectors have been changed. So I could be dealing with a piston slap or connecting rod. So just dealing with the lifters first and seeing if that fixes it, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so basically what we have here is I've gotten the lifters out and the little shim. And not really seeing a whole big difference here. Took one out of the front where the noise was coming from. Took one out of the back. And how I'm doing it here. So I have a little piece of hardwood here, it's red oak. And then I took this M2 little metric bolt. This is stainless. And then I just got rid of most of the threads. So that way it fit this hole here pretty perfectly, and then tap on that with a hammer, and out comes the lifter, and it doesn't mess up the shim here at the end or anything like that. So these here are the front 2 cylinders, that's the lifters, and then these here are the followers for the exhaust valves. And so far, initial observation is the ones towards the back of the engine are coming out a little easier. And then some of them, if I open them up and I go like that, they feel like they kind of catch, like they don't feel like they're as smooth as they should be. So I'm going to kind of go through and check them all and see if I find any that are smoother than others, because maybe that's catching and that's causing it to seize up when it's running. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up some pictures here of what the follower and what the lifters actually look like. And so basically, to sum it all up, I've had this noise for quite some time, and it got a little bit worse over the past several thousand miles that I put on the car. And I could really tell that the noise was coming from the cylinders 1 and 2, which is passenger side, your front right 2 cylinders. And I do know that the injectors have been replaced, so I thought maybe that was also, maybe there was some other issues going on. But anyways, after I took it apart, I couldn't really tell an exact difference between the lifters, but I did know the noise was coming from the front. And some of the lifters did seem like they had a little bit more wear, especially towards the front of the engine. They didn't quite stick, but I did definitely notice when I tried to squirt some carburetor cleaner through the check valve on all of the lifters and the followers, that towards the back of the engine, the check valve operated just completely normally, and towards the front of the engine, it would get stuck shut or it would get stuck open. So likely that's some carbon buildup on the little ball and spring that if you take this apart right here, is right inside here. And you can actually take this all apart and take it out and clean it that way as well. I ended up soaking them and cleaned them a few times, and then the front 2 cylinders, I just replaced the followers and the lifters. The reason I didn't replace them all is they cost $10 to $12 each, so you're looking at about $150 per side of the engine with shipping and everything. And so until I really ruled out that, hey, the lifters are the issue and I'm not hearing a connecting rod, a piston slap, or valve guide wear, I didn't want to throw a whole bunch of money into it, so this was kind of an experiment, but then as you see, it ended up working pretty well. Okay, so the new lifters are in, and now I basically just have the bridge bolted just loosely, finger tight. Got all these here bolts torqued down. It was 10 Newton meters plus for the first stage, and then plus 90 degrees, so that's roughly like 7.3 foot-pounds. Yeah, it's pretty nerve-wracking to tighten this down, making sure you're not messing up the bridge, make sure everything's lined up, and certainly don't want to mess up the cam. So I just got the cam lock off, and now I'm going to tighten up the tensioner and reinstall that, and then I'll take the zip ties off of the sprocket there. So we should be pretty much ready to rotate the engine a little bit with a ratchet on the crank and see if everything looks okay. Okay, so now you can see I got the engine back to 40 degrees past top dead center. Now that I've turned the engine a couple of times, everything's sounded pretty good, and if your timing is right after you've rotated your engine, cam tool slides right back in perfectly. So that's how I know. Didn't skip any teeth, which honestly I probably could have got away with just zip tying it and doing the YOLO route, but that's a little too sketchy for me. So anyways, now that that's all verified, the tensioner has been reinstalled, so pretty much get the alternator, the belt, valve cover, and all that jazz, get it all put back together and get ready for a first start. So now it's been even more days later, and the car is running so much better. It's so much quieter. There's still a little bit of noise, and keep in mind I only changed 6 out of the total 24 in the entire system, but it is way improved and it sounds way better, and it definitely ruled out in my mind that, okay, the piston's good, everything's good. And for the most part, these engines are extremely reliable, but I don't know this car's full history. We've got 200,000 miles. It does have a Eurocharge tune on it, but other than that, I can't really tell. Somebody's definitely been in there. They replaced the valve cover gaskets with Victor Rines. I personally don't recommend that. I put genuine Mercedes back in, and they're like $17, so they're only a couple dollars more. And I noticed that they fit in there much tighter. It seemed like the rubber was a little bit thicker than the Victor Rines. That's just my take. Both sides of the Victor Rines were leaking profusely on the exhaust, so it was definitely something I already wanted to do. I also did the driver's side as well. So in the next video, I will be doing a little bit of maintenance on my transmission. I'm doing a full transmission service, replacing the conductor plate, and changing the TCC PWM solenoid, which is a torque converter lockup, to help the 1 to 2 jerkiness that I get as soon as you start accelerating. So between that all, it should be better. And also I'm working on getting transmission tunes for all 3 of the AMGs to speed up the 722.6 a little bit. So stay tuned for that, and thank you all for watching. And until next time, bye for now.